Right, okay, so we're just going to do the last session. I think we're going to probably get through active and reactive monitoring and possibly not into incident investigation, but we are actually already ahead of our original schedule, so we'll do the incident investigation probably in the next session. Now, in terms of active and reactive monitoring, so for both groups, whether you're on the NG1 or the NGC1, they're both from your respective element 4, because element 4 is about checking and monitoring. The title of your element is different, but the knowledge in both is the same. So we're going to have a look at monitoring of standards and checking. So we're going to look at methods and indicators, how we can monitor the effectiveness of our health and safety management system. And as I say, we're probably going to not get this done today, but we'll do the how and why incidents should be investigated, reported and recorded. We'll do that separately next time. So this is a health and safety management system. What health and safety management system is this a picture of?
HSG 65.
HSG 65, excellent. So HSG 65, Health and Safety Guidance Note number 65. And those of you doing the NGC1 instead of the NG1, your course elements 2, 3, 4 and 5 were based on plan, do, check and act. So the old management paper, plan, do, check, act, you had 4 elements, 1 on each. So your checking is the bit that we're doing today, and checking involves measuring performance, and we'll also be looking, not today, but at the next session, at accidents and incidents. So if a company wants to manage health and safety, you can have your health and safety policy, but if you want to develop it, you could use HSG 65. It's a good structure that shows that we're managing health and safety in all different parts of our business, and we're looking at the whole package in terms of planning, checking, and then taking action if we need to improve. So this is another health and safety management system. So which health and safety management system is this?
Let me take a guess. Is it 45,001? Is it the ISO one?
It is. It's the ISO 45001. Yeah, I don't like the guess bit of that, John, but yes, no, you're absolutely right. Be more confident. Yeah, so ISO 45001. This is the international recognized health and safety management system. And you've got, if we just look at it very briefly, we've mentioned it in a few other elements. Organizational context. You look at your organization internally and externally and make sure your management system relates to your business, and you need to take into account who your customers are, who your clients are, where your products go to, where they come from, where your site is located. So that's the organizational context. Then within this one, you have leadership. So establishing a framework for leadership, making sure health and safety is led from the top. And in this particular system, leadership includes establishing our good old-fashioned health and safety policy. Then we go to planning. So planning what we're doing, setting aims and objectives. Then we've got support and operate. So having safe systems of work fit into that, having training, having emergency procedures. But the bits that are relevant to what we're going to do in our final session, in ISO 45001, you've got performance evaluation. So performance evaluation is their method of checking what you're doing, and then that leads on to improvement, which is the equivalent of ACT. So if you find there's a problem, let's make some improvements, and then that filters round and the system starts again. So ISO 45001 It's based on plan, do, check, and act, you can see, but it doesn't use any of those words apart from planning, okay? So it is based on plan, do, check, act, but it uses different words. Now, this little diagram, which I've drawn, if you had ISO 14001, which is an environmental management system, if you had 9001, they all now use the same headings. But under each of those headings, obviously 45,001 is all about health and safety, 14,001 is all about the environment. But if your company has more than one of the ISO standards, if you follow the same framework, it's easy to have one and then develop it into the other. Okay, so these particular headings are part of the new format of international standards for health and safety and for management, by using the same structure to help businesses and avoid duplication. Okay, so if you've got a health and safety management system of any type, you are going to need to monitor and check. So before we look at the techniques, if we want to know about health and safety, there are 3 ways that you collect data. We can call them all snazzy things, but if you want to find some information out on health and safety in the business that you're in or a business that you're visiting, you can do an observation. So you can go and have a look. So in health and safety, we might call that a workplace inspection, but an observation is just looking around at what you see. And last week when Paul talked to you about health and safety cultures, he had the little scenario where he says your first week in a new job, what might you see that leads you to believe they've got a good safety culture or a poor health and safety culture? So observations. Then you can talk to people. It may be formal interviews, but collecting data, just speaking to people, asking questions, them asking questions of you, you can get a feel for what's going on in health and safety. And then you can review documentation and records. So we may call them all more snazzy things, but if we're trying to find information for an audit, a review, or to monitor health and safety, these particular 3 methods are the methods that we use. They're the only 3 methods really of finding out and gathering data. What we do next with it is different, but we're gathering the data. So those of you who've had external audits, or you have your customers and clients come in to check on what you do, I bet you they've gone around and had a look, done some observations, they've talked to you and other employees perhaps, and then they've asked to see your documentation and records. And once they've done that, they'll assess whether they feel you're doing the right thing. Now I'm going to use 2 different terms, and these terms are similar but different. And sometimes you need to just make sure you read when there's a question, excuse me, when you are answering a question, are they asking about monitoring or measuring? Because sometimes they're interchangeable. Now, monitoring is the way I actually, monitoring techniques are where I gather information on health and safety. So doing a workplace inspection is a way of monitoring health and safety. Doing an audit is a way of monitoring health and safety. Carrying out some health surveillance, that is a way of monitoring your health. So we are checking one aspect of health and safety. That's monitoring. But we can also measure. And the difference is, and this may sound amazingly obvious, measures have got to be measurable. Okay, so a measure has got to be measurable. So it's got to be the number of, the amount of, the percentage of. So monitoring is checking something, but measures have got to be measurable. They are similar but different. So hopefully between now and 12:30, we'll clarify the difference. Okay. So we're going to look at measures first of all, and we're going to look at measuring health and safety. How do we know if your health and safety management system is working? And as I say, measures have got to be measurable. So we've got 2 ways of looking at this. Reactive measures are based on things that have already gone wrong. So that is why they are reactive. They're looking back. Now, then you've got either proactive or also known as active measures. So proactive or active, both terms are used. And proactive measures are measures you measure what you're doing that is good. Okay, the things you're doing, you're measuring the good. The other term that is sometimes used for measures is key performance indicators. And so your company might have key performance indicators, and some of those key performance indicators may be reactive and some may be proactive. But key performance indicators, by their very nature, are usually measurable. You go into the reception and you see the charts, showing how your company is doing or your site is doing compared to others. So the first one we're going to have a look at is reactive measures. So from a health and safety perspective, what things can we measure that are based on something that has gone wrong? Okay, so I'm going to give you one to start you off. So the most common reactive measure is the number of accidents that have happened in a given time. So the number of accidents is a reactive measure. Can you see? Because it's based on something that's already gone wrong. So 2 minutes on your own. We've got the number of accidents is a reactive measure. Think of any other things that we could measure, but it's a measure of things that have gone wrong. Something has already occurred. So just a couple of minutes. See if you can write down any other reactive measures. So here we've just got, for instance, you get the data, different causes of accidents, but it's reactive because something has already gone wrong. Here, you might have 3 different factories. They get numbers of accidents and they sort of plot them by quarter, but it's still accident trends, accident statistics. They're all reactive because something has gone wrong, but we can learn the lessons. We can try and do some things that improve.
Jackie, surely the near misses come under proactive as well, though, right?
No, they don't. I know it's a strange one, but if you have a near miss, a random, unplanned, unexpected event, but it hasn't caused injury or even hasn't caused damage, the reason we would still call it reactive is something has still happened. We've been lucky that it hasn't injured anybody or anything like that, but we would normally call incidents and near misses, we'd still call them reactive. Now, obviously, if we investigate them and we take action, that's good, but the measure is still what we would call a negative measure. It's still a reactive one, because something has happened.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So now, as a health and safety person, we do sometimes get accused of all you ever do is tell us what we're doing wrong. So when we're measuring health and safety and monitoring health and safety, we can measure all those reactive things, and it does come across as very negative. So we need to then wear our positive hat and say, okay, then let's measure some things that you're doing which are good, but we're still measuring. They've still got to be measurable. Okay, and the reason I'm emphasizing the word measure is because people sometimes mix this up with monitoring. Monitoring is getting the information, but a measure has got to be measurable. And so for instance, a proactive measure would be the number of risk assessments that have been completed. So it's not the risk assessment that's the measure. Can you see? It's the number of risk assessments that have actually completed, because that's you could measure that today and then measure it in a year's time. The number of actions taken as a result of a risk assessment, that's a measure. It's an interesting measure because people tend to do them and not take any action. The number of risk assessments reviewed. Does that make sense? So a risk assessment is not a measure, but the number of, in this case, that would be measurable. You could measure it today, measure it in a year's time. So you're measuring what you're doing that's good. The number of staff attending the health and safety induction course. That's a measure. The number of workplace inspections completed. So a workplace inspection is a way of monitoring health and safety, but the measure is the number of inspections or the number of hazards spotted, the number of health surveillance activities undertaken, or the results of health surveillance. We're looking for things before they've caused a problem. Doing a noise survey or a dust survey and getting the noise level or the dust level, can you see we're going out and trying to find the issue, but before it's actually caused a problem. But each one of those, as I say, and I won't say it anymore, each one of them has got to be a measure, a number, the percentage. So anyone got any ideas, anything else that you measure at work that's proactive? So it's measuring things that you do that are good, measuring the things that you do that are good. Maybe number of training days, you know, you might measure that.
How about a number of days without an accident?
Now, it's a funny thing you should say that. So see, personally, I think the number of days without an accident is still a reactive one, but I can hover, but because it's even though you're saying, oh, we've had 100 days without an accident, it's still linking it with something that's negative. Where can you see all of these about things that you do that are good? So it could be the number of safe systems of work that you've updated, the number of communication campaigns that you've done. Can you see more positive things? So I'm hovering on that, the number of days without an accident, because it's almost like setting you up to have one next week just to make it reactive, but it hovers halfway. But can you see, if you're looking at health and safety, it's about not just measuring the bad, try measuring and looking at the good, because in some cases, something may have gone wrong, but equally people may have done some good things. It's giving them also the benefit of the things that they're doing that's good as well. Monitoring techniques are linked to measures. So doing a workplace inspection is a way of monitoring health and safety. You go and observe. Next session, we'll have a look at audits and reviews, where we look at the effectiveness of your health and safety management system. Sampling, I take a noise sample of the air or a dust sample. It's proactive. I'm going out and trying to find out what the situation is. Carry out health surveillance. So they are monitoring techniques, but some of the data that you gather, can you see it could actually lead to a measure? So workplace inspections, one of the most important ways that you can monitor health and safety. So you can see a nice little picture there of some hazards in a area where they were storing equipment for use outdoors. So a workplace inspection, what a workplace inspection is, it's the identification of hazards, things with the potential to cause harm, but it's not just about identifying the hazards. We can all do that. A workplace inspection is identify the hazards and make recommendations to reduce the risk of injury. A workplace inspection is similar to a risk assessment, but with a workplace inspection, you identify the hazards and then you go straight to the control measures. Whereas with a risk assessment, we say who's at risk, what's the risk, existing controls, cuddly toys, etc. Whereas an inspection is very much here and now. I can see a trailing cable. This is what we need to do about it. I can see a blocked fire exit. This is what we need to do about it. So the risk assessment is looking at the bigger picture. A workplace inspection is here and now. What can we see? What are the problems? What do we need to do about them? It's a bit like your car MOT. It's what they see on that day. And the reason I'm emphasizing that is people do get confused about risk assessments and inspections. Risk assessment is looking at all the hazards and risks to do with work activities. A workplace inspection is checking the standards. If you've done your risk assessment, you do an inspection to check people are actually following and doing the things that you've said on your risk assessment. So you may, if you were doing a health and safety or health safety inspection, you may use a checklist or a pro forma. So you could just walk around with a blank sheet of paper, but your company might give you a checklist that it wants you to follow. So just for a couple of minutes, if you have a checklist for you to follow to carry out a workplace inspection, just make a note, a couple of advantages of using a checklist, but then counteract that with a couple of disadvantages. So just a couple of minutes, see what we can come out with. Okay, so I'm not going to pick on anybody, but please feel free to chip in, because what we're going to do, we're going to try and get 5 advantages of using a checklist to carry out our inspection and 5 disadvantages. So anyone want to open it up? So advantages, what's the useful, good things about using a inspection checklist?
So you have written like proof of time, date, and who's carried it out?
Yeah, so you've got written evidence that you have actually done it. Yes, absolutely. So it gives you instant evidence by you completing it. Yeah, excellent.
It provides a structure, so an aid memoir almost for the inspector.
Yeah, so it gives you a structure for the inspector to actually follow. Absolutely. So it could help give you consistency in terms of that. Yeah, excellent.
It can be completed by anyone, not just the person that did the risk assessment.
I'm maybe not anyone, but I'm gonna say perhaps with a checklist, it could be completed by a person with a lower degree of competence. Because if the checklist says, as the one I've put in front of you, are the floor surfaces even? You don't have to be the world's expert to say yes, or they can be useful. So then let's swing it around and say what might be the disadvantages. Having said we've got some good things, but why might they not be? Why wouldn't we use them all the time perhaps?
Somebody might just go, if it's a yes or no, just tick all the way down and not read the questions.
Yes, so I'm not sure, Sarah, I don't know, honestly, dreadful. But yes, someone might actually fill out the form without actually doing the inspection, particularly if you have an inspection that you have to do on Monday of every week. After you've done a few, you might just think, well, I know all the answers, I can just fill out the boxes without actually doing the inspection. It could be the checklist is out of date, or it's too generic, doesn't cover your particular area and the specific hazards that you've got. Some of them are too long and too sort of, complicated. But more importantly, a checklist might, in the opposite to what Sarah said originally, I think, if you have got a checklist, it might encourage someone who's not competent, can you see, to do an inspection. So they're right or wrong. I like checklists. If you can train certain people up, you can then get a range of staff involved, but equally, they're not the be all and end all, because you can get very blinkered. And then once people have done them a few times, there is the tendency for human behaviour to maybe tick the box or fill out the form without actually even carrying out the inspection. So it can almost become a bit of a lip service, activity. But in the right place, they can be useful because they are a means of checking how effective our health and safety arrangements are. So from an inspection, as I say, it's a physical examination of the workplace. You're looking for hazards, but also potentially unsafe actions of people. Might be completed by local managers, employees, or remember your trade union safety reps, health and safety reps do have the right to do workplace inspections. They don't have the right to do risk assessments, but they do have the right to do workplace inspections. You don't have to, but you may use a checklist. Personally, I tend to use a blank bit of paper, but if someone's less experienced and you want to make sure that you're covering a range of things, having a checklist can be useful. Inspections should be done regularly. You know, just like you, every time you use your company car, if you've got one, you do all the checks of all the, you know, the tyres, the water and all that sort of thing. But, you know, doing regular inspections allows you to keep a handle on things and spot problems before they become serious. And they do enable you, as I say, to identify trends, particularly if, you know, that could be in housekeeping or fire safety, blocked fire exits, damaged equipment, etc. And it allows you then to target, well, what are the things that they haven't caused accidents yet, but if we don't take action, they could actually lead to accidents. So an inspection is a proactive monitoring technique. We're looking for the hazards and problems and seeing what we can do about them before they've caused an accident. So they are similar to risk assessments, but they're the here and now, whereas the risk assessment is the bigger picture, all of our work activities, not just what you can see. So we've looked at a checklist. What might determine how often I do an inspection? So I might do it once a day, once a month, once a week, once a year, once in a blue moon. So what sort of factors might determine, what might an employer consider when they are saying, well, okay, we are going to do some inspections. How often might we do them? So what sort of factors might we take into account? In terms of determining how often we do an inspection, it might be the hazard and risk level, the number of accidents, it could be the time of year, it could be the type of work, it could also be the type of people that we've got. If you've got people that are more vulnerable, can you see you might do inspections more often? It could be legal requirements. Now, there's no law that says do workplace inspections, but if we've got a workplace, to ensure that we are complying with the various regulations like electricity or workplace or COSH, can you see you might do an inspection to check that we are complying. The number of people, you might, if you have lots of organisational change or lots of people moving around the site, lots of vehicles, you might increase the level of inspections. Now, hopefully it's not going to happen, but you might do more inspections if you've just been prosecuted or had an enforcement notice, because you'll do the inspections then to make sure that we're taking health and safety seriously. It might be the requirements of your own policy or your safety management system, and depending on what industry you're in, it could be your customer or client. Because if your customer or client wants evidence that you're managing health and safety effectively, can you see you might do inspections more often? Okay, so we've got general workplace inspections that we've just mentioned there. Just a few other types of inspections or checks. Health and safety surveys. Sometimes when people talk about a health and safety survey, that almost would be like where we actually send a questionnaire to staff, where we ask them about what they know on health and safety, you know, the location of the fire exits, first aid arrangements, etc. Health and safety tours. Health and safety tours are a mini inspection, visualize a workplace, go in through the door. And what a health and safety tour is, you walk a set route around that workplace, and all you do is count the number of hazards. So it's designed to be quick and easy. You count the number of hazards, but if you had 5 factories and every time you went to each, you did a safety tour as soon as you arrived, you go in, walk a set route, count the number of hazards. Can you see, if you did that over 4 months, it would enable you to paint a picture on how well or not that factory is dealing with health and safety. Because if the number of hazards just goes up, it's clear they're not dealing with things. Is the number of hazards going down? Obviously, if there's something high risk, you would still report it, but the technique is just about counting the hazards. This is a health and safety sampling, slightly different from doing a noise sample, but health and safety sampling is exactly the same. You go in to the workplace, walk a set route, but you count the hazards, but you only focus on one particular type of hazard. And these are really useful because let's just say you've had a problem with fire safety, blocked fire exits, that type of thing. So you do a health and safety sample, you count the number of problems you've spotted on fire safety. You then do a campaign and some training, reminding people on what they should or shouldn't do in relation to fire safety. And then a few months later, you do a sample again where you walk round and count the number of fire-related problems. And then maybe in 3 months' time, you do it again. And it's designed to be quick and easy, but can you see, it can actually be useful to see that your campaign has actually worked or not. But it's designed to be a quick tour, not a full-blown inspection where we have our checklist and then you know, make a note of all the specific issues. It's a measure. Behavioural safety, the main detail is outside of our syllabus, but behavioural safety, it's focusing on those unsafe actions, those unsafe behaviours. And when you do a behavioural safety observation, you ignore the equipment and the workplace, but focus on what people are doing that's good and what things people are doing that's bad. And you might target particular types of behaviours, whether, let's say, poor manual handling techniques or something like that. And again, you train people up to do the observation, and then you actually train people to challenge unsafe behaviours and try to get people to then change their behaviour, explain why, and make improvements. We've also got statutory inspections or examinations. So particularly for those of you doing the NG, you already have looked at lifting equipment and ventilation systems, but there's only a small number of things in law where you have to do an inspection. So if we have any cranes or lifting gear or hoists, if we have any local exhaust ventilation, if we have an excavation, various laws actually say you will inspect those at specific intervals. Traditionally, with an inspection, it's about what you can see. In the next session, we'll talk about audits and reviews, and people do mix the terms up, but audits and reviews are looking at management arrangements, whereas inspections are you're out there looking at pieces of equipment or looking at the workplace, okay? What you call them at work is up to you. But if you're answering a question in the context of generally accepted practice, the inspection is in the workplace, the audit and review is looking at the management system, where you might look more at policies, procedures, and paperwork. So I've just got one little bit just to finish off for you. And this is particularly relevant to the NG1 people, but as it's only 2 slides, I'm going to do it for all of you. Right, we have looked, in this session, we've looked at reactive and proactive. Reactive was things that have gone wrong. Proactive is measuring the things that you do that are good. Now, there's lots of theories on health and safety out there, and lots of different people use different terms. So 2 other terms that can also be used in the context are leading and lagging indicators. So some of your companies, we said about key performance indicators. So leading and lagging indicators. Now, a lagging indicator is what I said earlier is a reactive measure, and a leading indicator is a proactive one, okay? So different terminology, but it's the same thing. Some companies call them reactive and proactive. Some companies call them lagging and leading. So you might have them with your aims and objectives. Okay, so it's a buy one get one free opportunity. Reactive, think lagging. Proactive, think leading. Leading is what you're doing. Lagging is what's lagging behind, what's happened already. Okay, so just as a summary there. So lagging indicators, they're retrospective. What's already happened? What's gone wrong? What hazards have caused that accidents? It's a measure of failure. So do you see what I mean? Lagging is the same as reactive. Whereas leading, it's the things we're doing to manage health and safety, linking to our aims and objectives. It's looking at improvements. What hazards might lead to an accident so we can do something about them now. So that's, you know, doing a workplace inspection, spot the hazard, what can we do now? So they're about measures of success rather than measures of failure. So as I say, rather than trying to learn them both, if you go reactive and proactive, but then just think, lagging is the same as reactive, leading is the same as proactive. It's not right or wrong, just different terminology that's used.